In this presentation, I'm going to go over the Windows host preparation for Hadoop development. If you have a Windows 10 OS, I believe this will work with Home or Pro. You can use Windows Subsystem for Linux to set up your Hadoop environment. So let's take a look. There's a few steps you have to complete, as I mentioned in the overview. The first step is to enable WSL and then install one of the Ubuntu distributions. I'll go over those steps. This is the main page for WSL installation guide for Windows. If you're running a newer version of Windows, there's WSL2. You could consider installing that. My Windows distribution is a bit older. If you want to check what your distribution is, you can type WinVer in PowerShell. It will bring up the Windows 10 logo. I have version 1809. So there's a couple of ways you can go about setting this up depending on what you're comfortable with. If you are used to PowerShell, you can use PowerShell to do most of it. If you prefer using the GUI, you can go into settings and about Windows features. Here we go. Turn Windows features on or off. I get prompted to make sure I want to do that as an administrator. And then you'll see that there's a list of features here. I have Hyper-V enabled, but I'm not running any containers right now or virtual machines. So here we are. If we scroll down, we'll find Windows Subsystem for Linux. If you do not have this checked, go ahead and check it. Press OK, and then you'll have to restart. If you prefer to go the PowerShell route, you just run this command from an administrator PowerShell session and then restart the computer. After you have WSL enabled, you can go pick a distribution and download it. The best way to do this is through the store. And I'll let you do that on your own. You go to the Microsoft Store. You select which Ubuntu you want, or you can click the link here. I think we should use the latest 1804. However, if you already have 1604 installed, or you prefer Ubuntu 16, that works as well. I'll be showing you 1804. An alternative to the store is to click on the server instructions, which will work for your Windows desktop as well. And in here, you'll find a link to directly download the distribution. So this allows you to grab the installation package without going through the store. I prefer that way myself. So you're going to install the package, and once it's installed, we can search for it, and we'll find Ubuntu 18. I also have 16 installed. Unless you really know what you're doing, I would only install one. If you click on the Ubuntu 18, it will open up the Ubuntu shell, the default shell that comes with it, and you'll see this first line of installing. This takes a few minutes. That literally takes several minutes. So go do something else, come back. Eventually, it's going to prompt you for a username. I'm just going to use my first name. And then you have to set a password for that user. And then the password updates completes. And you're also given administrator privileges, so you can do things as sudo, which we will need during the installation. So that's the first step. So Hadoop requires Java, and the minimum version is Java 8. Java 8's still fairly common, so we'll install that. Before we can get the package, we need to do an apt update, and then we can install Java 8. This will go and update the indexes for app. and we'll update any applications that have changed since this Ubuntu image was created. All right, now we can try to install OpenJDK. There may be one other step we need to do. Nope. Okay. Sorry about that. In case you're wondering, I'm using a Mac and then remote desktop to connect to the Windows box. All right, while that's going, I'm going to pull up the Hadoop documentation. And hopefully you've seen this page already. If not, here it is. We're going to use release 3.2.0. And the reason why I'm pulling up the page is I want to give you a quick look at the documentation. We're doing a single node setup. So there are a couple of steps for Ubuntu in particular, and that's to install SSH. I'm not sure exactly what this step does, but it seems to be required. And then something called PDSH. All right. So we can sudo apt install SSH. This will install a few more packages, libraries that are needed for Hadoop, I suppose. And then this other utility called PDSH. I found that in order for PDSH to work, you have to set an environment variable. So for our Ubuntu, this is a typical practice. We're going to set those in etc profiles. So if we sudo vi etc profile.d and let's just call it hadoop.sh. That's where we will put all of our settings. So this first one is PDSH CMD type equal SSH. So we'll set that. We also need to set our Java home. So if we do which Java, and if you do an ls, you'll see that this is really a link. So they're using alternatives. And we can look at exactly where that's going. And you'll see that it's going to userlib JVM Java 8. Let's go back. So we've installed these two apps. And they're recommending we use user Java latest. So what we can do is we can create a soft link to that. So ln -s / I will have to do this as root or with a sudo. So user lib JVM Java 8, and we'll stop there because that's the home, what we want to set Java home to. And we'll link that to user lib JVM latest. So if you look at user lib jvm latest. We'll see that that's our Java directory. Let's just go back in our history. We're going to edit our hadoop.sh file, and we'll add export java home equals / user lib jvm latest. Okay, we're almost done with our host preparation. There's this final step of creating the installation directory. When we're using Windows Subsystem for Linux, there's some special considerations here. So let me jump ahead to this additional slide. We're really working in two different worlds because we want to work with our Windows system and we want to run Hadoop and maybe even build our code in Linux. So running the daemons in the Linux system works well. The daemons bind to the network ports on the Windows host, so we can use our browser, Internet Explorer or Chrome or whatever you're running on your platform to reach the Hadoop UIs. The difficulty lies in how to bridge the file systems. We can use Linux to build and run our applications, but we want to run our IDE in Windows, so the IDE needs to be able to see the files we're working with. The good news is our C drive is mounted under /mount/C. The bad news, our Linux file system is not easily reachable from Windows. So we will use the Windows file system for our working files that we're using in Linux. To do this, we create a folder on Windows that will act as the shadow for the Linux files. I'll get into the details in a minute. Just beware that the EOL or end of line notation for text files is not the same on Linux as it is on Windows. So whatever tools we use on Windows need to respect the EOL character that we use in Linux. We'll get more into that as we start to develop code. So let's go back to the Windows system. I have set up a folder under Documents called Hadoop class. You can name it whatever you like. But this is our shadow folder that we're going to use to mount or to link our Linux file system to the Windows file system. So I have a Hadoop folder and then I have a work folder. We'll use the Hadoop folder for user local Hadoop. We'll use the work folder for everything else, our code and maybe even our data that we want to have access to in our Linux file system. So let's use the shell here to link the folders that we want to link. In this case, we'll just link the user local Hadoop folder. So I'll need to use sudo and then the ln-s command, S for soft link. And we're going to link /mount/c/users my username on Windows /document and then Hadoop class, the parent folder, and finally Hadoop. We're going to link that with user local Hadoop. I have to enter my password. Now let's see what it did. There it is. Okay, we can see that user local Hadoop is pointing at our C drive and the shadow folder we created in the file in the Windows. If we examine the Hadoop folder with File Explorer, we don't see anything right now. So we're going to touch a test file within the Hadoop folder. Let me get that typing right. Okay, so now you see in File Explorer that the file test appeared. So this is just a simple demonstration of how we can share the file between the two worlds. And that completes our host setup for Windows. And now you're ready to move on and install Hadoop.